Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Michael Riso, a former golf instructor, author, and teacher of peace, whose life has been shaped by both profound loss and extraordinary resilience. After nearly 40 years of teaching golf, Michael's path shifted through experiences that would challenge anyone. A terminal mesothelioma diagnosis. Wow, becoming the full-time caregiver for his wife during her battle with ALS, and eventually navigating life after a person. Yet, through decades of meditation and a deep trust in intuition, Michael discovered something remarkable, a way of living with peace, gratitude, and almost no stress, even in the midst of suffering. His upcoming book, Finding Joy in Daily Living, offers practical wisdom for reducing unnecessary suffering and learning how to experience calm and joy in everyday life. Michael, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's very happy to be here.
All right. Wow. So, Michael, can you take us back to, when you were much more younger? What was it like growing up, and what experiences shaped who you are today?
I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and I lived there for almost 20 years. I had a mom and dad who were very much caring individuals, and they taught us good values, which was probably the most valuable thing I remember from my parents. Um, my mom, she was loved by everyone. There was no one in all the years that I had been around my mom that I ever heard anybody say anything negative about her, ever. Her nickname, which my brother Frank gave her, was Sweet Mare, because her name was Mary
Hmm.
Lou. And anybody with a nickname of Sweet Mare, you got to believe is a sweet person. She was also strong in that when my dad passed away at 44 with 7 kids to raise, uh, she did it all. And she managed to keep through it and adjust and keep the family together. So that was the early part of my upbringing. And I learned to play golf when I was 11. That's kind of what got me hooked on it. Went on to college. Well, I actually was not a particularly good student as far as my ability to retain information. So I ended up at 3 different colleges over a 6 year period, but I got my bachelor's degree eventually. And that was pretty much up to age early 20s.
Wow. All right. So, hmm, looking back, right, what would you say were some of the biggest lessons that you learned from your 20s?
Well, the lesson I remember immediately was actually when I was quite young. And my father and myself, and I think my 2 sisters, went into a supermarket to buy some pop, soda pop. And he needed 2 cases of pop for he taught court reporting stenography. And so we walked out with 2 cases of pop and he paid for it. And when we just got out of the door, I remember him turning around and saying, "We need to go back in." And we went back in and he said, "You only charged me for a 6 pack instead of for a case." And the girl had made a mistake and then he paid the difference and we left. But that was my first lesson in honesty. Um, Not that she would have ever caught it or we caught it, but he did. And that was enough to go back in and do it, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So that was really valuable lesson.
Wow. All right. So thank you for, sharing that beautiful insight. I think it's also a lesson one can learn now actually from you, honesty and so yes, I want us to talk about, teaching golf and learning simplicity. right? So you spent nearly 4 decades teaching golf. So what did that profession teach you about, people and life, basically?
Well, first thing it taught me was that everyone is different in how they perceive information from me, and also
Mm,
that personalities and their backgrounds play a big role in how they learn. So after a while, I started to almost act like a psychologist and said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And as I found out where people were, their jobs, their backgrounds, whether they were insecure or confident, what they wanted from their game, I just started to be able to teach them at a different level, not just the structural part, which I got much better at and pretty much perfected the fundamental teaching, but then to learn about personalities and knowing how to approach people. I always was about simplifying. Since I was a young man, I wanted to make my life as simple as possible, but it takes decades and a lot of introspection to get to the point where you can create more simplicity in your life. Teaching golf, of course, is difficult if you make it complicated, but the more you can simplify it for people, the faster they learned. And that, of course, made it much more enjoyable for me because the easier I make it for them to learn, the easier and the more smoothly the lessons went.
mhm. All right. Wow. Okay. So, looking back, do you think life was preparing you for, something deeper all along?
Well, I always felt that I wanted to make things easier for people. I didn't quite know how.
Mm,
I thought that was from teaching golf. And I easily expected myself to teach into my 70s and 80s. I couldn't kind of picture doing anything else because I was getting so good at it and it was becoming good income. But then when my wife got sick, I started to realize that I wanted to do something different. If I influenced people's lives by teaching them golf and making it more enjoyable and something they could go to that gave them joy and pleasure, then maybe I could do that at a different level beyond the golf game. And that's why now I'm pretty much becoming a full time author and writing either nonfiction books or poetry that is at a level that's much easier to understand than a lot of the poetry I've found out there, and things that can influence people's lives.
mm. All right. So, yes, thank you for, sharing that beautiful insight with us. And I want us to, touch on the themes of caregiving, loss, and love. First of all, I want to, extend my sympathy. I'm sorry for the loss of your, wife, and your journey, caring for your wife, Nancy, during her illness was incredibly demanding. So, what sustained you during that season?
I think I always had the inner fortitude to continue and move forward. Um, I always saw myself as a problem solver, not a person who gained anything from complaining or bemoaning my fate. I just felt I should continually learn and grow and move forward. So when things got challenging with Nance, first she fell, then she wasn't able to walk very well. Then she could walk with a chair she would push along the floor because we have terrazzo floors, so it was relatively easy to slide a chair across it. And then it became she wasn't even able to do that very well. And then I began taking care of her, taking her to the bathroom at times up to 20 times a day. Um, we went and saw a urologist and saw if it was some infection. It wasn't that, but I think some of it was tied to her disease, which we later found out was ALS. And that's a terrible disease that pretty much takes away everything. takes away a person's ability to handle and hold on to objects, the ability to walk. The body starts losing weight. Um, she couldn't really speak and be understood after a while when it was down near the end of her life. And that was a challenge because nobody could understand her when she was trying to communicate. I was pretty good at it. So when she had full-time caretakers, I would interpret whenever I was home. When they'd call and say, I just don't know what Nancy wants. She's trying to ask me for something, but I can't understand her. Then I would come into the room and Nancy would talk in their kind of broken language. And I would be able to say, oh, what she wanted was this. And so that was, I just always felt that we all as human beings should serve people to the best of our ability, and certainly people we care and love about. I mean, love and care about.
Wow. Okay. All right. So, how has that grief transformed your understanding of life?
Well, everybody is going to go through suffering, and we do. There was somebody in our neighborhood when I was a child. I was about 15, and Greg lived across the street. And it was interesting because we had 7 children in our family, and the Worders had 7 children in their family. We had 4 boys and 3 girls. They had 4 boys and 3 girls. And one day, Greg was delivering newspapers. He was 16, and he got run over by a neighbor who didn't see him, and he died. And
Wow.
so loss can happen at any time. Our ability to understand that as a human being, we're going to eventually leave the body, and we don't know when that's coming, can really help us grow in compassion, grow in understanding, grow in patience, and also learn to accept what's happening around us because things will happen, both good and bad. And the more we accept it, the easier it is to be able to cope with it and deal with it. The grief I experienced with Nancy was pretty strong for a month or two after. But then, fortunately, Nancy was a very high spiritual being and visited a couple people after she left the body. So I knew when they told me that she had come to them and what she said or didn't say, that certainly took a lot of any concern about worrying about my wife who was not in the physical body anymore. That made it much easier.
Mm, mm. Oh, okay. So yes, Mike, first of all, I want to say thank you for, you know, sharing your story with us, even though, I would say it's a vulnerable one, but you're sharing your story regardless. It takes strength and resilience to be able to do that. So thank you, Mike. I really do appreciate it. And yes, talking about, finding joy in daily living, because that is your focus, right? So your book is called Finding Joy in Daily Living. So why joy rather than happiness, basically?
Well, I was looking up those two words, and sometimes they
Mm,
overlap each other. But happiness to me is something that usually will happen when something outside of us happens. Not always, but we get a call, hey, my brother Joe is coming to visit. Hey, and I feel happy. Or I decided I'm buying a new car. So I say, hey, that really makes me happy. I finally got rid of my old car, or whatever the case might be. But it usually is related to something happens outside of us. Joy is a state of being. Now, you can certainly experience joy and feel joyful when something outside of you happens. But the joy I talk about is an ongoing, constant state of peace, happiness, seeing the best in what's going on. I mean, I just left a menswear store because I needed to buy a couple suits and a
mm,
jacket. So the whole experience was joyful. I got this nice
mm,
woman, Anna, And then as we talked, she could feel my openness and my vulnerability and my expressiveness. And I was there for at least an hour and a half buying a couple suits and sharing with her and also another coworker, really expanding their way of seeing the world. Giving people hope and encouragement and an more uplifting way of being, when probably most of the customers they had were just guy going in, I need a suit, I got a meeting in an hour, I got to go, and just going through the motions. But I like to experience feelings exchanged back and forth with people I meet, whether it's on a Zoom call or a phone call or somebody I see in a supermarket line. You can always, if you have the joy inside you, and we all do, it's just, I think, suppressed in most people, and we start to access it and express it, there's only good that will come out of expressing that from inside. And so I live there and I try to teach other people, yeah, you can do more of that. You can live more in that place, but maybe you need to see things in a little different manner than you have in the past.
Wow. All right. So, yes, like you said, finding joy in daily living, just, connecting with people and be happy. Well, one thing is, as humans, some of us are always, identifying with our worries and our thoughts, right? So, how do we stop identifying with our worries and our thoughts and be more grateful?
Worries are very rarely ever something that's happening right now. They're
Hmm.
almost always from the past or into the future. If I
Okay.
go back and I were to recreate um, problems I had with business partners, and I recreated being in that room with them, with their lawyer and my lawyer, and the uncomfortableness of it, and I didn't know the outcome, I could create a quick sense of worry if I wanted to, as an example. If I went into
Hmm.
the future and I said, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen if it's going to rain this weekend. Maybe my golf classes will get rained out and I'll lose the money I would get. And there's that's unnecessary worry. That's the mind not allowing us to stay in the present. When we're in the present moment, there's virtually never worry. Then, how can I be talking with you and be worried about if my pool is getting algae in it, or if my tires need to be filled in my car, or a million other things that you could worry about? Or, I hope my mom who's sick, I'm referring to somebody else who might have a sick mother, she's in the hospital and I, hope that she doesn't get worse. That chit
Hmm.
chat in our mind only makes things harder on us. And it's a choice to go forward and backward. And it's also a choice to stay in the present moment. The more we stay in the present, that much, much happier we'll be.
Hmm. Wow. Staying in the present moment. Right. Wow. Okay. So yes, thank you, Michael. This has been, deeply insightful, I would say. And your story, I believe, is going to, encourage people out there and help them just, live a more joyful life, practice, joy in their daily life. And yes, before we go, I want you to, talk to someone out there because that is the sole purpose of my podcast, right? Giving advice to young adults who are trying to seek clarity. So for now, there are people out there who are probably going through grief, loss, and they don't know how to navigate the whole situation. They are struggling to find joy in their situation. So, what advice would you give to people like that to, help them live a more happier life?
There's always a core principle that we need to start from if we're going
Mm.
to deal with challenges we face in a much easier manner. Most people, I would say, don't develop this for many years, but it can be developed as simply as this. I tell people I did not create myself.
Mm,
And if I didn't create myself, that means some other being must have.
mm,
That being I refer to as God, although I tell people you can call whatever that person, that being, anything you want, creator, Jehovah, Buddha, Jesus, you can call that being anything you want. But the truth is, we're part of that energy. We're part of whoever created us. If we get that, then we can have faith that we're being watched over and taken care of. That no
mm,
matter what comes at us, no matter how challenging it is, that we have to have something to turn to. If we only turn to our mind, which is the opposite of what God is, the analytical mind, there's no end to the suffering because the mind will talk and talk and talk, create worries, create fears, quite, most often things that don't even happen. And that's a choice to go there. So you have to start to overcome the way your mind talks to you and learn to talk to yourself from a loving space. If you don't do that because you've had a tough upbringing, you've gone through challenges most people can't face, then you need to find somebody to talk to who is more growth oriented. They're beyond where you are, and then you can listen to them, take their advice, and start to absorb some of their energy because you can't solve it from the same place you're in if the only place you're in is in suffering and loss and so on. But you don't have to go backward, you can always move forward.
mm. Wow. Right. It's like you said, you don't have to go backward. We can always move forward. Right. So thank you, Mike. This has been really, really insightful and deeply grounding, I would say. And finally, before you go, where can listeners get to, learn more about you and also connect with you?
All people need to do is go to my website, which is findingjoydaily.com. And when they go to the website, if they want to read some sample chapters from my book, there's actually 72 chapters in the book, but there's 6 on the website. You can read that and get a feel for the book. And whether a person decides to order it or not, they can certainly learn from some of those 6 chapters. One off the top of my head is compassion. So that's one of the chapters they can learn from. There's also a couple freebies on the website if a person wants to be contacted when the book comes out in August and provide their email. There's 2 perks. One of them is 31 fortune cookies, basically one for each day of the month. And you read the fortune that goes with each fortune cookie, and they're part of the chapters in the book that encourage people and help them to feel better. And the other perk is 132 quotes that I've accumulated over nearly half a year that are very much moving and insightful and helpful from people, some famous from the past, others people we may never have heard of, but they're from both men and women. And those are really helpful if somebody wants to look at those every now and then and just page through them. I do that myself. I scroll through them every now and then.
Mm. All right. Wow. Okay. So yes, I'm going to put the link in the show notes so it's easily accessible for listeners. And to my listeners, I would say thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone who you think might need this. And also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episode. Once again, thank you, Michael, for sharing your beautiful story with us, and do have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Thank you, Sekani. You too.
All right, take care.